Today we're going to talk about background checks, both for employees, for volunteers, and this is an important subject in my mind. Our goals around this, we need to know, what is the need to do background checks? Sometimes we're legally obligated to that. Sometimes it's just a good business practice, but it brings with it some risks and some potential for claims, potential for some bad press, a potential for some negative things. And so we've got to balance those things out. So hopefully today we'll be able to learn some best practice that will not only protect our applicants, but also our organization and help us avoid lawsuits and losses and the problems that go along with those. To start out, I would like to start with a poll, and Mike's going to run that in the background. That should pop up on your screen here in just a second. I think I had 4 questions on this poll, and this will give us a little bit of an idea of the temperature of the group on what you do with background checks. So you can go in there. First question: do you currently do background checks in your organization? Check, click, check, excuse me, check yes or no or not sure. And the other questions that we have there: background checks for employees, volunteers, or both. The next one: what service do you use to run your background checks? Is that BCI here in Utah, a private company, or we have the PD run them, or do you use a combination of those resources? And the last one: do you have a written policy to guide your background check process? All right, we've got a good percentage of everybody have answered there. I'm going to run through those quickly. Keep that up for a second, Mike, so then I can see that. So the first one: do you currently do background checks? Vast majority, 75% of you, are currently doing some sort of background checks in your hiring process. Okay, and that's kind of expected. Are your background checks for employees, volunteers, or both? 0% on volunteers. That kind of surprises me. Oh, then I have to look a little further. 52% say both. So, all right, so we got a 50-50 split on that. That's interesting. What service do you use to run your background checks? 30% use BCI alone. 37% use the private company. About 11% run it in their own police or sheriff's department, and 22% say multiple. They're using some of each. And you have a written policy. About 17% say no, and 27% not sure. 57 say yes. So what does that tell us as we look? It's kind of what I expected coming out of this poll. You can go ahead and close that down, Mike. That is kind of what I expected going into this. Now, of course, this is not a scientific study. It's who signed up for the webinar and then attended. But that gives us some ideas. And we'll come back to those numbers just a little bit as we talk about how we run our program when it comes to background checks. Well, here's an interesting statistic as we're talking numbers. It's right about 90% of employers do background check. This is nationwide. Depends on which survey you talk about, whether it's EEOC or SHRM. But it's right there, really tight area. 87 for SHRM and 87 for EEOC and 92% for SHRM. 2 different studies there. 90% of employees, everybody is doing it. So what if you're not doing it? What does that mean to you? Well, that might mean that, here's the truth about things. People talk. Hey, this place doesn't do drug screens. So that might be a good place to go get a job, because you wouldn't pass elsewhere when people are talking. Same thing might apply for criminal background checks or other types of background checks. Hey, I know this place doesn't check, so you may have a disproportionate number of applicants who are trying to avoid a background check or a drug screen or whatever it may be. So realize that the vast majority of people are doing this. Well, we ask the question, why do we do background checks? Well, there are a number of reasons, and they're important reasons. Number one is to verify the application and resume data that the applicant has provided to us. I never really thought about lying on my resume. I probably could be making more money today if I embellished a little bit on my resume, or I would have not gotten the job because I'd lied. But I just never that never was something that I thought, oh yeah, I'll just add some things here that I haven't done on my resume. Didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but it's a thing. And it is a very common thing for people to add information that they really didn't do, or maybe degrees or certifications that they don't have, licenses. And so that's one of the key elements that we have in doing background checks, is just to verify that people are being honest in what they tell us that their background is. Another major reason why we do background checks are for protection of those people at risk. For a lot of you, you work with vulnerable populations, either children, maybe we're doing our recreation or athletic programs, and so we have coaches or other people that are working around those programs. That those children could be at risk if we had the wrong person working with them. Um, and Others out there are working with vulnerable adults, either people that have a certain mental condition that doesn't allow them to, impairs their decision making, or they're aged. We have people that are, delivering Meals on Wheels, or sometimes we have senior helper programs where people are going out and volunteering or being employees to help out those vulnerable populations. Other reasons why we do background checks: to protect our staff. If we bring somebody into our team who has a history of harassing people or being violent in the workplace, well, that puts our staff at risk. And so if we can head that off and not bring them onto our team, that's going to be a benefit for us. We're really being proactive that way. Other things: protect our organization from loss. Well, what does that mean? Well, financial responsibilities. If I've got somebody we're hiring in our finance department, a treasurer or other title within our finance area, and they put their hand in the cookie jar, in the till, and take money from us, well, that could be a potential loss for us as an organization. So finding the right person that is credible and honest when they're working with valuables and have access to those valuable resources, our tax dollars, it's important to be able to verify them. And then avoiding negligent hiring suits. If we hire the wrong person and they do something wrong, that could get us on that back end of that. Oh, I got to go back here. I should have. This will help people to. I should have asked this to start with. Who's the person in this picture? And this will give you a chance to find that chat box so you know where you can ask questions. Does anybody recognize this? Mike, you recognize who that is? Mike,
No, I don't.
you don't. Does this guy look credible? He looks like a good guy to hire.
Mark Hoffman?
It's Ted Bundy.
Oh, Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy, one of the more infamous, if you know the lingo, infamous of the serial killers, and he looks like a pretty good person, right?
Yeah, Utah's own. Utah's
own, right? He spent a good deal of time here in Utah, and he looks like a all right looking guy, and dresses all right. Turns out he was a serial killer who killed multiple women over the years. So background checks are an important thing. However, it is a complicated. Oh, by the way, Mike, did anybody answer that in the in the chat? I can't.
We had a couple of answers. One said Mark Hoffman. Somebody else said
Ah,
serial killer.
yep, definitely serial killer.
Nicest guy in the world, it looked like.
It does. I'd hire him. Anyway, it's a complicated issue, though. It may not be quite as clear as it seems, and then we have some bumps in the road that would make it even harder. The EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, get that right, came out with some direction on that, and we'll talk about that more. But it complicates when we can do background checks and how we can use that information. Along with that, the Fair Credit Reporting Act also governs background checks. This is a very, very regulated field, or area of our practice. And so we've got to be aware of what the laws are and just what we can do. Just having a blanket policy, we're going to background check everybody, and we have a zero tolerance policy. If you've got anything on your criminal record, we're not hiring you. That can get us into trouble with these regulatory agencies. All right, let's keep going here. So the question is, to check or not to check. In reality, I don't think it is a question. I think we have to do it, but how we go about doing it is the critical part. You saw that 90% of employers are doing background checks. If we're not, we're probably getting some folks that maybe, because they drift to areas where they're not going to be checked, we may be putting ourselves at risk for that. There are some times when we are legally obligated to do background checks. If people are working with children, if there is some medical situations, if you are a hazmat, if you're a CDL operator that transports hazmat, you have to have a background check. It's legally required. So we have to do it. The question is, how do we go about doing it? Who do we check? Of course, those that are required by law. Oh, and at the outset, I was going to talk about this. I am not an attorney, folks. And I'm going to give you a lot of information. We're going to talk about laws. We're going to talk about best practices and all of those things. Here's one key thing, and I'll say this again before we're done, probably a few times. You need to work on this in concert with your attorney. Your counsel and you working together on this is essential to have this work well. This is a very difficult subject to ensure that we've dotted all the I's and crossed the T's from a legal standpoint. So definitely, if your attorney isn't on this session today, forward the link over when we put it up onto our YouTube channel later this afternoon. Forward that to your attorney and say, hey, please watch this and let's talk about where we stand on our policy and our practice on this. So really remember that, and also remember, I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving you legal advice, but I'm hopefully giving you some things that will help you make the right choices and get counsel from your attorney so you're doing it right. Are we going to do everybody? And that's a choice you can make. I think sometimes that can be problematic if we just do a blanket, especially if we do certain types of background checks, medical and various things that is not appropriate for the type of position that they're being hired for. So I would be very careful about doing anything in a blanket type fashion. How about only people that have duties with vulnerable groups? I think that's a reasonable way to look at that. People who have fiduciary responsibilities, who are handling money, who are responsible for those taxpayer resources that we have. They definitely, in my mind, should be on the list. Sometimes we have confidential or secret information. After college, I graduated from college, and I started getting these phone calls from background check organizations, and they were federal government things. I went to school with a lot of people who ended up working in federal agencies in one fashion or another, and they had to get a background check to be able to get security clearances. And for whatever reason, they put my name on the list as, hey, call Jason for my background check. And these were really detailed things. They'd take about an hour. They'd call up, do you know so and so? And then they would go into a lot of detail about the relationship and how I knew this person and decisions they'd made. And I wondered about that. Why are people putting my name on there? What if they ask about that time we anyway, it's there may be people out there that need to have confidential secret information. They may be a good one to have on the list. What about volunteers? Well, as we've talked, sometimes our people working with vulnerable groups are volunteers. And I know a lot of times we're just happy to get volunteers that will come and do this, but it puts us in a tough spot if we hire somebody, quote unquote, hire a volunteer and put them out with a vulnerable population. What if they do something ugly with a child or with a vulnerable adult? Well, that's a problem. So I think we have an obligation to look at our volunteers as well, similar to what we do an employee, if they are in those job areas where they are exposed to vulnerable adults, they're handling money, those things that we've talked about. Okay. So when do you check? Never do a background check or a drug screen or any of those real background type checks prior to making an offer of a job to this person. So it's a contingent offer. We are offering you this job, but it is contingent upon passing a background check, that you have a good driving record. We're going to check your MVR and pass a drug screen, and maybe you have some other things that are in there as well. So always make sure that it is after we've done a contingent offer. Then the other question that you have, and that's another one I should have put on the poll. When do you do your background check? Is it only prior to hiring this person, or do you have a follow-up procedure? You think about that. We hire somebody and they pass this background check when we hire them, and then we have them in our employ for 20 or 30 years. Could there be things that go sideways during that 20 or 30 years? That may be something else that you consider is, do we do a periodic background check on our staff that have been with us for a while? And I think that's a decision to make. I think a lot of companies and organizations that are trust members say, they passed when they got here and we know them from there, we're probably okay. That may be sticking their head in the sand as to what really happens with people. All right. So what do we check for? Most of us do some background checks, even if we don't think they're really a background check. We may call a reference, right? That we have them put references on there. We call up, hey, did this person actually work there? What was their job title? And some basic questions. What were the circumstances under which they left? Some basic questions about that, and questions about credibility. And we do those things. Educations or licensing records. How many times when we hire somebody do we verify with their university that they had the degree that they said? Or do we go to Doppel and look at a professional license for that person? Drug tests are a kind of a background check. MVRs. I'm going to come back to social media in a minute. MVRs. Motor vehicle records checked. And you can do that through the trust, right? That's a requirement that we have, that when you have auto coverage with the trust, you provide us a list of the driver's license numbers for all of your drivers. And then we put that into the system. We have access to the driver's license division records, and we will share that information with you. So then you can make good decisions about qualifying your drivers and who needs to be focused on a little bit. Hey, this person has multiple violations. We probably ought to coach them a little bit. Or, wow, look at the history of this person. They should not be driving for our organization. Criminal, and if you're interested in MVRs, talk to Mike or myself, and we will work you through that program. If you haven't updated your driver's license numbers for a while, let's get those in right now. We're gonna be pestering you a little bit to make sure that we've got those up to date. Criminal records, that's probably what most of us think of when we think of background checks. Yeah, we're gonna do a criminal background so this person can work with children or something like that. Credit history. Why would we look at somebody's credit history? Well, let's say we're putting somebody in one of those important financial positions, and we might do a credit history on them. And if we see that they've got a bankruptcy or they have some real financial problems, well, that might be an indicator that they're not the best person to put into that position. But we have to be really careful with that because there are a number of regulations around that. The Fair Credit Reporting Act guides all of that, and we'll go into that more detail. Medical exams. Well, we have to be really careful of that one. Never do a medical exam before we have a contingent offer there. And really, I would steer clear of anything medical because we run into challenges with disability. There, I would stay away from those unless it's something that is mandated for the type of position that they're in. I should have put social media at the bottom of this. This is one that I think is kind of risky, maybe. We go on, okay, so we get it down to somebody. We've offered them a job. Sometimes we may not have done that, and this is where it could get us into trouble as well. I haven't done a contingent offer, and I stalk them on social media. I look up their accounts, and I look what they've been up to. What do they post on Facebook? What do they do on Instagram? What do they do on X? Um, and maybe make decisions around that. This is pretty risky in my mind. Um, be careful of that. It can give you an idea. However, I think we run into some potential there for free speech violation, because people are, they're free to talk about political things, free to talk about other things. It's a two-edged sword. So I would be very careful including that as part of our background check procedure policy. Talk to your legal counsel about that as well, so we can avoid those pitfalls. I think there's some great information there. Don't get me wrong. I just think it is fraught with a little bit of danger. All right. Who performs the checks? And you guys have answered this already. Many of you use a private agency. Why would we use a private agency? Well, in some ways, they do a lot of the work that is menial and it takes time. So if I do just a fingerprint check, a criminal background check, I'm not going to get some of those other things as far as verifying our employment, where they live, and a few things like that. So private companies are valuable resources. You can get a background check done from anywhere from $10 to $20 up to, really the sky's the limit depending what you're looking for, but over $100 for doing that. And not all of these companies are created equal. We'll talk about a resource here in a minute to kind of check up on who we're using. The Bureau of Criminal Identification here in the state of Utah, they look at criminal records. They look at the FBI file. And they are an outstanding resource. We'll talk about them a little more. We have the PD run a check, or the sheriff's office run a check on this person. Should you do that on your own? I caution you in doing this. For a number of reasons. One is just the purpose of having that access is for a certain thing. It may not be for employment. I would follow through more official channels and use BCI to do that. I know that's not nearly as easy, but I caution you from that. I think that may expose us to some jeopardy. I'll just say that. And then I throw this in at the end. Have you ever Googled yourself? Now, is that, I don't mean as a vanity thing, and I Google myself not to look and see, oh, hey, it's more of a risk management thing. What is out there about myself? What are people saying? Or what about people with my same name? What are they doing online? And could that have an impact on me if somebody looks at me? Additionally, have you done your own credit check just to verify how you look on paper? Because sometimes there are problems with that. All right, I got to keep going. I'm gonna get off in the weeds. We got to make sure that we've covered everything that you need to know. Um, so on these private agencies, you get what you pay for, right? And I'm not saying pay a whole bunch of money, but do your homework on these. Check their background out. There is an organization called the Professional Background Screening Association. And these companies, and there are hundreds and hundreds of companies that do this type of work. They rate, I don't know if that's the appropriate word, rate the performance, and you can see sample reports from them. You can, if you want to do work with one of these companies, ask them, can you send us a sample report so we can see what the end product is? Yeah, I could go online, I could look at the list of people attending here, and I could go online, and in a matter of minutes I could pay some money and have a background check started on you. That's available out there. Now, there's some notifications that should happen, but in a lot of ways you're on your honor when you do that. So if you want to check out the person that's living next door, or you want to check out the person that your daughter is dating, it's pretty easy to do. It's available out there. So, but like I said, some of these companies are very reputable and they're really good, and some of them are a little shady, or just kind of fly by night. So make sure you've taken the time to do your due diligence in selecting the right private company. The BCI, the Bureau of Criminal Identification in the state of Utah, is a great resource for us. We have some laws that direct us that we have to do these types of checks. BCI is really good. As I was preparing to give this presentation, I called BCI just to make sure I was up to date on the information, and they were extremely helpful in answering questions and just being open. And I've had this discussion with others out there that they've had the similar experience. They call up and say, "Here's what we're doing. How can we make that work best with BCI?" So they to use BCI, you need to apply to be a qualified entity. That requires you filling out multiple pages of an application. To do that, you'll have to put on there a point of contact, and this is a reputable person that can be that main point of contact with BCI. They do different types of search. They'll do a name search, which is just what it sounds like, and then they also do a fingerprint search, where for people who are working with vulnerable populations, they look at the FBI. They also look at a system called WIN. That's called the Western Identification Network, and that involves 8 Western states, but not California for some reason. Largest state didn't want to participate, I guess. Here's one of the challenges that we get with this information, and I don't want to take away from BCI. They are really good. I'm going to say this: checks take time. Just they said anywhere from a few days to a couple of weeks, but it could take, in my mind, it may take longer than that. Here's some things to think about on that. This fingerprint search searches the available data. There is, I read a statistic that about 30% of courts in this country will not make their information available online. You have to physically go to their location to look this stuff up. Well, that's a big challenge, and part of the reason why we might hire a private company to do these things, if there has to be that type of a check. Realize there is no complete database of all of this. Everything is not tied together. And I will put a caveat. There probably is one all-encompassing database, but housed in the NSA building down there at the point of the mountain, and we don't have access to that one, right? But for the average person, realize that this data is limited. We're going to check what is available and hope we didn't miss something. And just along with that, data is not always complete. Also consider these things. There may be a listing there that somebody had been arrested on a certain charge, but it's not a conviction. Well, we have to be careful of making decisions based on that type of information. Until there's a conviction there, they're innocent until proven guilty. And so be careful of that. Accuracy may be a problem. If you Google yourself and you find somebody with your name saying some ugly things or doing some weird things online, somebody that's looking you up might find that information and go, "Oof, I don't know about this person. I don't know if that's the person we ought to be hiring." So we want to be careful of that, and sometimes up to date. There may be somebody that had a violation in something, a misdemeanor, and it's been expunged, but it hasn't been updated yet. So we have to be careful of when was this stuff updated, and also be careful of where the data comes from. I'm sure you've Googled somebody, if not yourself, and you'll see there could be some data that is erroneous or just completely wrong. All right, Mike, I have talked a lot. Are there any questions that have popped up that I need to handle by this point?
There was a code, or there was a question on, do we know what section of the code governs all this, the Utah State Code?
Hey, that's the next slide.
Hey!
So there are a number. That was the only one, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay. There are a number of laws, and this is not a comprehensive list of laws, just the ones that were easy for me to add here. I'm sure there are others that may apply as well. So we'll run through those quickly. I'm not going to give a detailed description of each one of those laws, but there's the Volunteers for Children Act. That's a federal law. Here's the Utah code around this. So 53-10-108. That's Utah based. The Civil Rights Act is really one of the predominant laws that govern this because it's discrimination if we inappropriately use this information. The Fair Credit Reporting Act, I already talked about that just a little bit. When we do a check on somebody's credit history or do a financial search on this person, that falls under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and we have some requirements, and I'll hit those in a minute. But things like the ADA, if I'm asking medical questions, that could get me into a difficult situation with disability. GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, never ask for somebody's genetic information, and don't get it in a test. It's easy to get, right? It's, put a Q-tip in your mouth, suck on it for a minute, drop it in the test tube, and I can get your DNA, sending it off to a lab. We don't want it. Right, I want to stay away from that information. And the IRCA, that's the Immigration Reform and Control Act, that basically says it's that we can't discriminate against somebody based on national origin or citizenship, except for undocumented immigrants. This is kind of a tough one, right, to balance that out. As we look at what regulatory agencies are watching, the EEOC that we've talked about, the Federal Trade Commission, the DOJ enforces the ADA, and in the state of Utah, the Labor Commission, the Anti-Discrimination Division of the Labor Commission, is the one that regulates in this state. If there is a complaint of discrimination, that they're going to be the ones that will be enforcing that. Common claims we see: negligent hiring, invasion of privacy, defamation, interference with current or future employment. Those are some challenges that we run into. So the basics of this is highly regulated. And so we've got to be smart about how we're doing it. We've got to have a good policy that has been reviewed by our attorney, and we've got to stick to it. and follow that process. Okay, some things around that. Equal opportunity. You HR pros that are out there, this is one of the major things that you oversee, is ensuring that we are giving equal opportunity for everyone to get this job. And so a key thing that we need to remember is don't take action based on somebody's protected class. We talk about that in the harassment and discrimination training. There are a whole list of those. And in many cases, I don't want to ask about anything that will show me that those protected class designations, because once I've got it, then they can say, well, you made these decisions based on this. So looking at race, creed, color, national origin, gender, the whole list that we have. Use the same process for all applicants. Don't just say, well, I grew up with this guy. I know who he is. He's a friend of mine. We don't need to do his background. Let's save the $50 doing the background check because I know who this person is. Well, that's where we get in trouble. We call that disparate treatment. This is the downside of checks. We can have constitutional claims for discrimination based on protected class status. Then we have this too, disparate treatment versus disparate impact. What is disparate treatment? HR folks out there know this. We treat somebody differently than others. So our goal in all of our policies and how we handle all of these things is treat everybody equally. Well, that sounds great, and that should be our goal. And once we get done treating everybody equally, are we off the hook? Well, here's the challenge that we face. It's this doctrine of disparate impact, and this is something that the EEOC has opined on, and basically told us that if we go down this road, we're in trouble. So is there a possibility that we can treat everybody equally and still discriminate against protected classes? And what the EEOC says is that there are certain groups, protected class, who are overly represented in certain areas as compared to their percentage of the population. And the real area of focus is on criminal history and particularly imprisonment or felonies, because there are certain groups who have a much higher percentage of imprisonment or criminal convictions than their overall percentage of the population. And so if what the EEO says, if we take a stance that we say we are not hiring anybody with a criminal history, or we're no felonies, we're not going to hire anybody with a felony, that could be used as evidence that we have discriminated against this particular group of this protected class. And I know that's a hard thing, but we have to think about that. So I said earlier, a zero tolerance policy is really problematic in this. If we say no criminal background, no felonies, or whatever that zero tolerance is, that's making it really easy for somebody to make a complaint. And the EEOC has spoken on this and said, well, if you do that, that is discrimination. So think about that as we put our policies together. All right. So it's kind of like this Far Side comic here. We got two choices. It's either one or the other. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. So if we have to do these we have to do background checks, we've got both sides of that. We need to protect those at risk, and at the same time, we need to protect people's rights as we're employing them or bringing them on as volunteers. So let's talk some best practices then. Policy. Well, we'll go through all of these, and I'm getting a little bit late here, so I'm gonna go a little faster. So your policy needs to give all of the details about how we do this. Your attorney, like I said, I'm going to talk about this multiple times. You need to have a legal review to ensure that we've done all of those things. You saw the list of laws that have some bearing on what this policy should be. Um, so must-haves. Don't have zero tolerance statements. Target your screening based on the job, based on the business need to do that. And have a process to clarify the results. If we get a problem, if a problem comes up and we're saying, no, we can't hire this person based on this, that person has to have a process to clarify. Oh, well, that really wasn't me. That was somebody with the same name, and they have to have a process to go through that. Okay, and we can verify all of that stuff, but that has to be in the process. We just can't say, sorry, you're not going to be employed here. So here's the process. Inform all applicants, but not on the application. That EEOC has said that you can't bury it in the employment application. This needs to be a standalone document that says you could be subject to a criminal or to a background check, not just criminal. And also having a statement in there would be important to protect us there. Having a criminal record won't automatically eliminate you from consideration for a job. Don't include protected class exclusions. We don't hire this protected class or something like that. Don't have statements, no criminal background, no felons, no arrest records. Watch those type of statements. That can get us into trouble. In reviewing the reports, what are we looking for? Years ago, BCI used to have something they just say pass or fail, right? You know, hire this person or don't hire this person, and that made it really nice. They don't do that anymore. They give us the data, they give us the information, and we have to look at that. So what are we looking for? We're looking for the character and suitability for the job. Does this person have the character, and are they suitable for this specific job? And it needs to be specific to the job. If I'm being considered for, or I've been given a job offer to go out and clean up trash on the side of the road, do I really need a background check for that? I don't know that we necessarily need that. How detailed would that be? Even if we decide to do a background check for that, if somebody comes up with, maybe they have a criminal history, should that preclude them from doing the job of cleaning up trash on the side of the road? Hey, they're probably an expert, right? They've been incarcerated and they've been out picking up the trash on the side of the road. So there are, I think we have to be very careful of being specific to the job. On the other hand, if somebody, we're hiring them to be our treasurer or finance director, and they have recent convictions of embezzlement or misappropriation of funds or something like that, well, that is very specific to the job that we're looking at, and is something that probably would preclude them from doing that job. In the EEOC, they said job related and consistent with business necessity. That should be our goal as we look at that. How good is our policy? There is an organization out there. They have what they call the Uniform Guidelines on Employee Selection Procedures, and you can go in and look at those guidelines. They're right on their website, uniformguidelines.com. Screening procedures consider the nature and gravity of the offense. If somebody was convicted of shoplifting back in 1985, does that have a lot of bearing on what they're doing today? Probably not. How much time has elapsed? Was it significant? Was it directly involved with the type of thing that they're doing? If somebody, was convicted of child sex abuse, well, yeah, I think that's pretty easy to look at that and say, even looking at time frame, this is probably not the person that we have working with children as a coach or something like that. Okay. All right, I got to keep going. When we take an adverse employment action, that means that we are going to terminate or we're not going to hire this person that we've given an offer to. There needs to be a process done before we take that step. We give the person a free copy of the report showing what the information is. We notify them of what our process is to dispute wrong information or update or give explanation on that, so they know what their process is, and realize that this comes right out of the EEOC and the Fair Credit Reporting Act. We have to give them an opportunity to write the information or dispute what may be in there. We need to provide them the contact information for the company that did the report for us, so they can contact them and correct incorrect information. We also need to provide them a copy of a summary of your rights under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And I'll send out a copy of that with the email announcing that the video of this is up. So you have access to that. Or it's easy to just go in and search for that name, your rights under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and it'll pop right up as a PDF. How long do we need to retain these background check documents? Even, we don't hire this person. How long do we need to hold on to that? And the answer to that is 2 years for government service. If private agencies can get away with 1 year, but for us in government service, we got to have that at least for 2 years. But I would just refer you back to your own document retention policy there. You may have something very specific on how long any of these documents need to be held. There are confidential documents. So just like these other documents that we may have, they go in a locked area where only authorized people can access that information. Okay, so just in summary, go into background checks with your eyes open. They are a valuable tool for us, but they also give us opportunities to make some mistakes. And so we have to have our eyes open. We need to use our legal counsel, make sure our policy is well written, that we have a policy, and that our attorney has reviewed that for compliance with these various different laws. And then make sure that we are treating people equally, looking at the potential for what the decisions that we make could have on all populations, particularly those protected classes. So watch that disparate effect or disparate impact, and then communicate and check your own record. Hey, you can get a free credit report by calling that number. There's all kinds of information available out there. Just go forward and be smart about what you do. It's not something that is impossible, but it's definitely something that we have to be wise in doing this and follow the proper steps. All right. Folks, if you got any questions or comments, type those into the chat box and we'll answer those now. What we got, Mike? Any questions?
No questions. I mean,
wow.
Yeah, did a great job. I mean,
I must either put them to sleep or they're mad at me for some reason. We would love to have a chat with you, either call Mike or myself, and we can answer those questions for you if you have those. Like I said, we're recording the session and we're going to put it up on our website. Excuse me, I said that twice today. We're going to put it up on our YouTube channel. Hopefully later this afternoon, if everything goes well in the editing world, and then we'll send out an email with a couple of documents that we referenced in here to help you out. Anything come up?
Nope, just very informative, especially the website links and resources. I mean, great job.
Awesome. Thank you so much, folks. This is a challenging one. It's been several years since we've done this topic. And it was interesting to go back and redo the research and see where some things had changed, and some things were even more complex than they were important to go to learn this stuff. And I'm always plugging our YouTube channel. But I'll just plug that. Go to our YouTube channel. In the middle of the page, there's a little magnifying glass. Click on that, and you can search through all 300 plus of our webinars there on whatever subject you might be concerned about. There's a wealth of resources, and I have to admit, I go back and watch my own webinars from time to time. Not just to go, wow, that guy really has a great voice, and look at how good looking he is. No, it's really there's a lot of information there that I think can help, and it's easy to stay 100% on top of those, or it's difficult to stay 100% on top of those all the time. So
Yeah.
use the resources that are there, and if you want to see the good looking guy, go and watch Mike's videos there.
We do
Thanks.
have a question real quick,
Oh,
Jason.
okay. Uh-huh.
Recommendations on when you can call references. Can that be prior to the offer, or should that wait until formal background check after the offer has been given?
I would do all of these after the offer. Yeah, I think that is the clear direction on any one of these things. Same thing goes for a drug screen. Same thing goes for MVR checks. All of those things. I would do it after the offer. I think that's where we can get into trouble if we don't. There was in the last time we did this video, there was a question: how long do we have to wait for somebody to file or to correct? The number I found on that was 60 days. So if somebody comes up with that, there's something on their record, they actually have some time to be able to respond to that. That puts us in a bit of a challenge with our with hiring, right? If we've got somebody that's just kind of hanging out there because we said, because of this information, we're not going to hire you, then we start that clock ticking.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks, folks. I know that was a lot of stuff. Sorry I went longer than we said, 45 minutes on there, and in reality, it's just a lot of stuff. So thank you for your patience in watching this. Please give us a call if you have questions, and come to Supervisor Success tomorrow. We're excited to do that. We'll buy you lunch.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, folks. Have a
Thanks,
safe.
everyone.
Thanks, Mike.